Welcome everyone to the February live Q&A call for the Accelerator membership. And we will just go through our normal run of show. So let me just start by introducing my co-host. So, hi Mom, how are you?
Oh, I'm fine. How are you?
I'm good.
Hi,
I'm good.
everybody.
What have you been up to lately?
Well, I have recently started trying out your personal leadership roadmap. There we go.
Yes.
Because even though I help proofread a lot of your things, I like to actually do the courses and use the resources. So I really like the way that you designed the roadmap so that people have a choice. They can either do a structured format, or they can do, I guess you'd call it a freestyle format, or a combination of both.
Yep.
So that they can base their learning on the style that fits them the best.
Yeah.
So I definitely am enjoying it. I've just started out actually doing it, but I think your members will enjoy it.
Okay, well, thank you, Mom. And so everybody, my mom is actually a professional educator. So she has a master's in education. She taught elementary school kids for a long time. So while she is obviously very supportive of her daughter, she's also speaking about learning styles from a point of expertise. So I really do appreciate that, Mom. And you know, some of the members actually asked for something kind of like that, a little bit more structure. You know, I personally prefer the freestyle. And I also, and one thing I will probably never do is what's called drip content, where you only allow people to get the next lesson after they've completed the previous lesson. That's a very popular style in online learning. And personally, I hate it because I always like to almost go through everything very quickly first to get a high level overview and then go lesson by lesson by lesson. So, I personally prefer the freestyle, but many members have said, like, how am I supposed to go through this? How long is it going to take? And things like that. So while those people that are starting it right now, I'm adding stuff as I'm going, but I would say within the next 2 months, it'll be a full kind of 8 to 12 week course that if you decide to follow the roadmap from start to finish, that can be a good place for folks to start who want a little bit more structure. So that's what we're going for. And I appreciate the feedback from the members. So, okay, well, I will take you off camera because I know that you prefer that. And and we will go from there. So just as a reminder, everyone, so my mom is here co-hosting with me. She primarily runs the chat. So you always have 2 options for asking questions. You can put questions in the chat, in which case my mom will raise her hand and let me know that there's questions coming, and she'll read your questions for you. And the second way you could do it is you can raise your hand, and then you can either just mute, come off of mute for your microphone, or I'm happy to put you on screen as well, if that's your preference. But I know for lots of folks, you prefer not to come on camera. So that's fine, whatever your preference is. So I want to welcome new members. So we have one new member, Tarcisio from Brazil. And some of you who are in the membership know Tarcisio, know that Tarcisio and I worked together when I was with Operum, and he is the head of research and development for the research team for Operum in Brazil. So I'm excited that he has joined us. And I had hoped to have a whole group of new members joining because I had launched a private cohort with a friend of mine, and that did not go quite as well as we had planned. And I will talk more about that at the end. I want to make sure we get to everyone's questions, but I'll share with you how that went and what we're going to do and what I decided to do, and just sort of I'll give you behind the scenes view on what it's like to try to launch a product and not have it go the way you had hoped. So quick overview of what has been going on in the membership since our last Q&A call. We had a couple different topics of the week. I asked how you unwind after work. I asked what's something you've accomplished as an adult that your younger self would be proud of. And I asked, how do you prepare for a big presentation or a meeting? So as always, you can go to our community forum and contribute to any of those conversations. We would love to hear about that. And then in terms of training and other content, as my mom mentioned, we just put a pretty big comprehensive course up called Unlock Your Authentic Leader inside the roadmap, or as my mom mentioned, you can just go grab that individually if you want. And this is really about defining your life vision and really developing the courage to go after it. And in order to do that, you really have to accept yourself, all of yourself for who you are. And when you do that, that unlocks your leadership capability, because you really cannot lead people through the turmoils of their own lives and their career, through the turmoils of your organization and the ups and downs that are going to happen if you are afraid to utilize all of the tools that you have to you, because you're ashamed of some things about some things that happened in your past, or you are worried that you're going to be disapproved of by peers and supervisors, or if you really, don't feel like you can learn new skills because of various, blocks that you may have. And so this course will help you deal with all of those different things, whichever of those come up for you, and then really, really figure out what you deeply care about and what is most important to you. Because at the end of the day, none of this development work that we're doing, none of this trying to, grow your influence, grow your impact, grow your earning potential, none of that's going to matter if 5, 10, 15 years down the road, you realize you are not actually where you want to be. And we don't want you to have any regrets. So really doing some self-reflection on what those things are that are truly important to you is where we want to start our journey of really boosting your career trajectory. So that I think we posted that sort of the middle of last month, and we're going to, hoping that you're continuing to work on that. One thing I did note in the last weekly update email that I sent, so I will be 1 week late on the technical influencer module. I had hoped to get that out this week, but hopefully you are excited for me. I got invited to give a TED Talk, and it turns out there's a massive amount of prep work that goes along with taking the TED stage. And so I really needed to devote some time to working on that. And so that's going to put me a little bit behind on our technical influencer model, but that'll be coming next week. So I appreciate your patience on that. Okay, so with that, I will just go ahead and start answering the questions that I got in advance. And as I said, feel free to raise your hand or add something into the chat if you, those of you who are live, have any questions. Okay, so question is, I have to help identify the improvement KPIs, which stands for Key Performance Indicators, for my new role. And there are so many to choose from. How do I start? Okay, so I'm going to assume that you are working on some sort of manufacturing process or some sort of research process, but something that has a multiple step process and you've been asked to come up with some key metrics to help identify improvement opportunities, make sure that quality is being delivered as everyone wants, etc. So a place to start is to consider something called the SIPOC model. So it's SIPOC. And Mom, if you don't mind to take a note, I will link a little summary about the SIPOC model for everyone. And that is an acronym for suppliers, inputs, processes, outputs, and customers. And it is, part of kind of the Lean Six Sigma methodology for manufacturing process and process improvement. And I personally really like that model because it forces you to give a very high level overview to really any process. So you can apply this model to one specific process that you might be working on. So for example, if you're working on manufacturing a car, you could use the SIPOC model for something as narrow as, inputting the tires or putting the tires on the vehicle at the end, right? So that is one sub-process in the probably hundreds of processes that go into taking the raw materials for a vehicle and getting the car to drive off the lot. So the SIPOC model can be used at the very narrowest sub-process or for the entire manufacturing facility that makes these vehicles. And so depending on your role, you can decide where you want to, what part you want to model. And then you simply just get a piece of paper and start writing down, okay, who are all of the suppliers in this process? The people that are giving you your materials, the people that are doing the equipment, the people that are giving you the utilities, all of the different suppliers that are providing you the pieces that you need. And then the next step is you list all of the inputs. So what are all of the actual materials themselves, the supplies that you need in order to make this process work? And then you continue through that model. And now you have just a high-level overview of that process. And then you can start to identify, okay, where are the things that are most important in each one of these steps in the SIPOC model, and you can put a metric associated with each one of those. And that's a great basis for establishing KPIs. Now, something you can typically do, is go and talk to some of the key stakeholders that are working in each of these different areas and just ask them, hey, what do you consider to be the most important metric in your area, of expertise? And oftentimes those leaders, those technical folks, oftentimes they'll be machine shop mechanics, electricians, all of the different people that are working on this. Oftentimes they have their own, like, okay, this is the most important thing that I track when I'm doing my job. And, nothing else matters except for this one thing. And so you can get some input in each of these different steps of the process. And then once you have that, you can kind of have a map of how you can develop your KPI list. And once you do, once you sort of have the whole system, then again, I would start getting some input then from leaders to say, okay, I've mapped out you asked me to come up with KPIs. I've mapped out the process. I've considered each of these different factors. I've met with key stakeholders that are involved in each of these different steps. And this is my recommendation for a set of KPIs that we could monitor, and then get some feedback at the leadership, your supervisor and above level, and see, what kind of feedback you get. So I think that overall process has served me well. I used to use it all the time when I was in manufacturing. I use it all the time now with entrepreneurs, because again, it's just a great way to say, all right, end to end, what are all the things I should be considering? And then once you map all of that out, you can start looking for opportunities to put metrics in each of those different places to make sure that you are not just so focused on one aspect and miss other very important things related to your process. So again, the SIPOC model is a great place to start. And then you can work from there to build whatever you determine to be your best set of KPIs. Okay, next question. I am having problems with my first transition from individual contributor to leader. Do you have any tips? Yes. So one of the things that I found extremely challenging in my first transition to leadership, and one that I hear, frequently is a challenge for folks, is this idea that the people that you work with, who maybe were formerly your peers, you all related to each other in a very specific way. You often focused on the technical aspect of things. You probably talked very logically about problems and solutions, and maybe even complained, about leadership. But you all related to each other very much on a kind of an intellectual basis, at least was my experience. And once you become a supervisor, one of the things you realize is that all of these people that you thought were highly rational and logical, they now become super emotional beings. And that is because you are now something that is potentially blocking them from some of the most deeply emotional things in their lives. So their livelihood, their time they get to spend with their family, their own status in an organization. These are all deeply personal and emotional situations that people are in. And it means that they're now relating to you in a very different way. And it can be shocking if you were automatically thinking, oh, we're all rational, I'm rational, they're logical. And now all of a sudden, they're behaving towards you in a very different way. So the first thing is, one, to recognize that people are going to relate to you in a very different way. And that now, you have to deal with people's emotions now. And I know for us highly technical folks, that can be extremely scary and uncomfortable. But the first thing is to be aware that that's coming. And then the second is to maybe do a little bit of studying on how to how to relate with people on an emotional level. There's a great book, and I will put the title in the show notes, but there's a great book about selling. It's a sales book, and it talks about how technical people can develop relationships with potential customers through different emotional aspects, and then become very, very good salespeople through what's called a customer advisor approach. So learning to understand people's emotional needs so that you can advise them very well from a technical standpoint. And I found that technical experts like us actually really like that particular book, because it helps us understand how to relate to people's emotions, but from the standpoint of a highly technical person. So I'm going to recommend that you take a look at that book, and you'll learn about, some people are really motivated by status. Some people are really motivated by wanting to maintain relationships. Other people are really motivated by, certain other aspects that doesn't necessarily have to do anything with the logic of things. And so it can be really helpful to understand what those things are, how to identify them in other people, and then how to adjust your communication style in order to kind of resonate with people that have these different ways of being motivated. And then the third thing that I recommend, and I recommended this many times, is to start to have weekly one-on-ones with everybody in your team. Because when you start to do that and have just brief one-on-one discussions, I always like to have a very specific agenda, which is that your direct report has 15 minutes to talk about whatever they want. And then you have 15 minutes to talk about, status updates, getting feedback, giving them feedback, whatever you want to talk about from a business standpoint. When you open up that time and be reliable and trustworthy in giving people that time, oftentimes what will happen is that they will become more relaxed around you, and they will open up more, and you'll also get to learn a little bit more about their motivations. And when you do that, that can put both of you at ease about this new way of relating to each other, that's not just about the data and the logic, but more about their own interpersonal inner workings and what's going on with them, because as a leader, that's something that you now need to learn how to deal with, and still get the results that you need from the teams. So the one-on-ones really help to build that aspect of the relationship that I think will help ease your transition from individual contributor that's really focused on data and facts to new leader that now has to relate to people on more than just a factual level, but you're now dealing with all of their emotional motivations as well. Okay. I'm completely overwhelmed managing my project portfolio, and I'm afraid that tasks are slipping through the cracks. What do you recommend? So this comes up quite often, and what I recommend is, well, first of all, let me tell you what most people do. So most people, when they get into this situation, they tend to go and look for or even create their own system that manages or tracks all of the information that they're trying to get a handle on. And it tends to be pretty complicated, and it tends to be hard to keep up with, and definitely impossible to get other people to contribute to, and maybe even update, because it is just this really highly complex system. And I understand why people do that. So you're all overwhelmed. You've got this information swirling around in your head, and you're trying to create a piece of software or spreadsheet that captures this chaos that's going in your mind. And what I have found works the best is to actually go the complete opposite direction, meaning don't try to capture everything. Try to capture the bare minimum of information that you need and make it as simple as possible. And so typically when you're talking about a project, what you really need to know in order for things to not slip through the cracks is you need to know who is going to do which tasks and when they're going to get them done. Those three key pieces of information will allow you to put some control around everything that you need in order to keep things from slipping through the cracks. Now, for sure, there's diagrams and there's slide decks and there's, graphs, and there's a bunch of other things around that will be useful for you to have available to yourself and for the team to have available. But in terms of making sure that a project happens and hits the deliverables, and that you as the project leader don't miss something important, it's typically just those three things. And so I actually created a project tracker that I put in the accelerator that captures just those specific things. Let me see if I can show it to you really quickly, just to make sure that you've seen it. And oops, I've lost the Zoom. Here we go. So let me share my screen real quick. So share your screen. Okay. So this document is in the resources library, and it is called the Simple Project Tracker. So we will also link this in the show notes. This is it's a very simple spreadsheet. So particularly if you're a portfolio manager and you have multiple projects, you would simply just put the project name, who, so the name of the person that does what, the name of the task, and the date. And then you can I added a drop down here for status, where if you're visual and you want to see some colors, then what I've shown, if things are delayed, it's a light red. If there's a problem that needs to be addressed, it's a dark red. If things are on track, where we're green, and if it's completed, it's a dark green. So you can simply just use this for tracking your projects. You can start here, and you can always add links to other documents that are supporting of your project. And the reason that I like this, there's a couple of reasons. So one reason, let me stop sharing. One reason I like that is because it's very simple for you to use, and it captures the essence of what needs to be captured. The other thing I really like about it is that it's so simple that other people can use it too, which means that if you miss a project meeting because you're traveling or something like that, you can easily delegate the updating and adding to a document like this, because there's nothing sophisticated. It doesn't require, you know, somebody to understand your special shorthand. It is just very basic information. And I will tell you, you know, those of you that have worked with me remember seeing a document like this. This is what I used when I was Chief Innovation Officer, you know, for a multi-billion-dollar company. The projects that I was personally leading, I use this tracker. Now, absolutely, somebody, if there's a really big project, you may need a dedicated project manager who is using a more sophisticated piece of software like Microsoft Project or Trello or something like that. And that's at a much deeper level. But when you are a portfolio manager and you have multiple projects and you just kind of need to at the surface level, make sure that things are going the way that everyone expects, make sure that you get your, you know, the few tasks that you're contributing to each of these projects, that you get those accomplished, then you can use something simple as this. The other thing that I would do with a list like what I just showed you is, if any of the people who have tasks are your direct reports, then in your weekly one-on-ones, you can simply, you know, filter on their name and say, okay, so by the way, where are you at on, you know, this action item that you have, these action items that you have for this project? I see they're coming up in the next, you know, in the next week or so. Is everything going as expected? So it becomes an easy tool for you to use as you're actually managing the people inside of your organization that are attached to these projects. So use that tool. And again, the mindset though is, if things are very chaotic, tons of information, and I'm overwhelmed, rather than try to build a system around all of that chaos to capture everything, it's to take a step back and think, what is the bare minimum information that I need in order to manage the most important aspects of this project? And so in my case, when it comes to projects, it's something like this project tracker. There are other things that I simply just create a simple checklist. And in fact, I've got, just hold up here, I've got the checklist for these calls. I simply just have a Word document and it says, okay, press record. That's the first thing it says, because I did, as some of you may remember, I did have the snafu on my second one where I didn't press record. And then I had to get up at 6:30 in the morning and record the whole thing over again. And it was a disaster, but a simple checklist, you know, press record. And then I've got the run of show. I've got the questions that I've got in advance that I'm going to answer. And I've got the date for the next meeting that I'm going to announce to you. It's very simple. I could have easily created a complicated spreadsheet. I could have created and, you know, done something in an app. I could have done all of those things, but my preference and what I recommend to others is start as simple as possible. Capture the essence, the most important things, and then you can build from there. Then you may find you need more sophisticated systems. But when you can start with the bare bones, one, it helps clarify your thinking, helps you focus on the most important. And then second, and it's true with this as well, other people can then use it, right? So in my call checklist, I just give this to my mom once we're done, and then she takes the recorded video and inputs the timestamps. And then this becomes what we copy and paste and put it in the replay post that we have. So again, because it's a streamlined document that just has the essence, it's very easy for others to utilize it. So that is my recommendation there. Okay, so this says, how do I boost my creativity? So this is a good question. So I know particularly many of us that are in the innovation space, coming up with the ideas is always seen as the sexy thing to do. There's a status associated with, being the one with the idea. And while I try to remind people that innovation is a multidisciplinary activity and that all different roles are important, I know there's still this sense of wanting to be able to wanting to be able to be the one with the idea. So I'll tell you a little bit about how you can actually just boost your, what I call ideation capacity. So how can you come up with ideas, particularly in the context of like brainstorming sessions or other times when people are looking for ideas? How can you come up with ideas? So the first thing I want to mention is that Steve Jobs had a great quote about creativity, and he says creativity is just connecting things. And I really believe that to be true. And so what you need to do if you want to be somebody that has lots of ideas is to really have a lot of what I call nodes, little experiences, little visual cues, things that you've seen, things that you've done, a bunch of those nodes that you can then connect to other things. And the way to kind of make those connections is really just to think about, I don't want to say think outside the box because that's a little bit overplayed, but to really have a process for thinking about ways to connect things that don't necessarily make sense to be connected. And there's a great tool for that called the Scamper technique. And Mom, if you don't mind writing that down, I do have a visual for that. It's simply just an acronym that talks about how you can, I think the first one is substitute. So the S is for substitute. And it says, okay, well, if you're looking at a problem or you're brainstorming a situation that you want to kind of fix, you can say, how can I substitute one aspect of the current solution for a different one? And then you can think about the C is for combine. Okay, are there things I can combine that will come up with a new solution? So the Scamper technique is a nice methodology that you can use. Oftentimes, I think it's used in design thinking, actual design thinking kind of exercises. But if you learn this technique on your own and then just practice it in the real world, then you can get better at taking your different experiences that you have and using them to come up with new solutions. So I'll give you just a trivial example of how I did this, so hopefully to kind of bring it to light. So many years ago, my family and I were in New York City because my son wanted to see the Empire State Building for his birthday. So we were there in New York City, and we went to one of the many parks that they have. And, our kids were, I don't know, 7 and 9 or something like that, or maybe even a little younger. And in addition to the normal things they have at kids' parks, like the slide and the jungle gym and all of that, they had these huge blue foam blocks that the kids could use to just make structures. And there were tons of little kids playing with these things, and they loved them because the blocks were bigger than they were, right? So they were having a really fun time moving these huge blocks and making these gigantic structures. So, I mean, I just noticed it and thought, oh, that looks like a lot of fun. And our kids had fun with it. And I didn't think anything more about it. I kind of filed it away as just an experience that I had. And then fast forward to several years later, and I was in a planning session with the industrial relations team I was working at Alcoa at the time, and they wanted to have an innovation showcase. And so what they were looking to do was to have each of the research leaders, and I was one of them, each of the research leaders bring some sort of show and tell type of thing to this big showroom and talk about our innovation to these high level institutional investors that the CEO was bringing through, because they just wanted to showcase, that we're an innovative company and that we have all of these innovations. And so the product people, I mean, they had it kind of easy, right? I mean, we make big shiny wheels for big rig trucks, and we make fasteners for airplane wings, and we make all these different things, these sort of like tangible things, and you can set those up all over the place, and people know what a tire is, and they'll walk up to it and like, oh, that looks pretty cool. But I worked in the process side, and so I worked with huge just industrial equipment, and in a process that was 960 degrees C and acids everywhere, and just not conducive to bringing a show and tell that people could play around with or even touch. And at the time, we were working on an innovation that was a quality control technique for carbon anodes, which are these huge big black carbon blocks. And so I was talking with the industrial relations team, just trying to describe, okay, well, these are the types of innovations we work on. I don't know how we're going to do anything. And they were fixated on this carbon block, and they're like, okay, well, maybe if we take the doors off of in this part of the room, and we can get a crane to bring the block in, and we put it on like a pallet with wheels, we'll be able to put it there and show everybody this carbon block and da 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 da. And so I was like, well, a couple of years ago, I was at this park, and there were these big blue foam blocks. What if we spray painted one of those black and pretended like it was one of these anodes? So, because the investors, one, probably wouldn't even know the difference, but two, we could simply tell them that this is a mock-up, because, and in the industrial relations, people were like, you're a genius, right? I mean, it's a trivial example, but what it shows is that in that moment, that was a creative solution to a problem. And it was simply me taking an experience that I had years ago and just transferring it to a completely different and unrelated, and not even necessarily someone would think, a new situation. And because I made that transition, that became a creative solution. And so when you really take a step back and look at like a lot of the design that we see in the world today, a lot of products that we see that seem to be super innovative, oftentimes are just someone had an experience in, I don't know, in sports or in music or in art, and said, and remembered something about that experience, and then said, I wonder if we can translate that into this technical problem, or this manufacturing problem, or this design problem. And then you end up with these really creative solutions. So what you need to do is, one, really kind of expose yourself to as many different things as you can. I suggest you keep a journal of different experiences, different things you might notice while you're out in the world. Often if you can kind of think about problems and solutions, you might just be walking around and thinking, oh, that's an interesting way that they fix that light so that it would go into that particular fixture, or something like that. Just any kind of thing you can observe. You keep a little journal of that, and then learn something like this scamper technique that will give you the raw materials that you need to really be the one to kind of have all sorts of creative solutions when the time calls for it. The other thing I would just say, one of those experiences that I think is really, really important, and I think some of the most innovative people that I had a chance to work with in my career were very close to the customer. They spent a lot of time talking to customers, a lot of time just helping customers solve, small little problems. And because they had so much experience with customers, they just had this library of solutions, library of problems. They understood sort of how the customers make things, what the customers care about. And they really were the ones who came up with some of the most innovative solutions when it came time to come up with new products or come up with new manufacturing processes. So I would definitely say if you're in a role where you can be customer facing and to just listen to what they're interested in, that can also be a really important source of raw materials for you to use as innovative solutions for your own firm, and just make a habit of really capturing those ideas as you're registering them so that you don't lose them. Okay, so next question is, I'm a busy parent and I can't get time to myself. So what can I do? So this is a great question. I definitely have had those moments. My children are teenagers now, so I have the opposite problem. They don't want to spend any time with me. But definitely I remember when they were young and I had that challenge, and I saw this question in advance enough to bring an important prop. So I'm going to talk to you about one of the things that I did, which was to use this little stuffed animal. So when your kids are really little, and I want to say that I started using this technique when my children were maybe 4 or 5, somewhere around that age. So I know for sure it'll work with that age range and older. I don't know, I can't say for 2 and 3-year-olds, although I think you could start to try to apply this technique. And so when my kids were about that age, I actually started to learn to meditate. I started learning transcendental meditation, which is you learn with the teacher and you meditate for 20 minutes twice a day. And so that meant that I needed to have some solitude for 20 minutes. But I have 2 little kids who aren't used to leaving mom alone for 20 minutes. So what can I do? So one of the things that I did that was really successful was I asked my kids to help me find a little stuffed animal that they liked. And so this is called Meditation Moose. And the dog got one of the ears. So this is called Meditation Moose. And I said, okay, when mom puts this on the door, this means that she would like a little bit of time to herself. And I didn't start with 20 minutes because they were little, but I started maybe with 5. And I said, so if you need me for something, when this is on the door, please don't disturb me, but I promise I will come back out. When I come back out after 5 minutes, I promise I will come and find you and I'll check in on you and see how you're doing. So I started with 5 minutes. I told them, they helped me pick the prop, and we hung it on the door. And I started with 5 minutes, and then I made sure that I was always true to my word, that right after the 5 minutes, I would immediately go out and say, okay, mom's done. Do you need anything? And sometimes they needed something and sometimes they didn't. And then, then it became 10 minutes and then became 15. And then finally I got up to 20 minutes. And that's, that's just what I did. And it worked really well. Now, one of the things that I know a lot of parents have struggled with is, what if they need me, or, struggle with the idea of not being available to your child all of the time. And I would encourage you to recognize that you are actually teaching your child a very important life skill. They need to understand that they need to be able to occupy themselves for a few minutes or even longer. And that kind of self-regulation is a very important skill that's really going to be important for them when they get to school. And I don't know if my mom wants to come off I can see my mom shaking. Well, she was shaking her head, yes, that she agreed with me. But then when I said, if she wants to come on camera, she started shaking her head. No, she did not. So I won't put her on camera. But I know my mom has stories of, little kids being completely unable to sit still long enough to even fill out a worksheet or do anything. Mom, do you want to, we can edit it out later. Okay, hold on just a second. Let me, We can edit it. We can totally edit it out if you want. Go ahead.
Okay, on the very basic level, I taught first grade for 20 years. And in the first grade classrooms where I worked, there was a little one bathroom. So we didn't have to take the whole class out and go around to the big bathroom.
Right.
But we still did that. But anyway, I digress. So I would say, Miss Adams is going to the bathroom. I will be right back. I promise. I'm just going, you've used this bathroom.
Feet away.
20 minutes, yes. But I have to lock the door because I'm the grown-up and I'm going to lock the door. And they're all nodding. The minute I go in and lock the door, teachers can go to the bathroom very quickly.
Yeah, right.
Lock the door. Mrs. Adams. So a lot of them did not learn that self-regulation. So it would have been very helpful in those 20 years if I could have gone for 1 minute in the bathroom with them, just, waiting patiently, reading a book, even chatting with each other. I would have been fine with that as well. So,
right.
So that's my little story about self-regulation.
Well, thank you, Mom. No, and I think it is really important because I do think that a lot of parents really struggle with the idea of leaving their child obviously make sure they're in a safe space. I'm not, I do all of those things, but just this idea, and even if they're knocking at the door, just sitting outside crying, that they have to attend to that. And I truly do believe that it is not cruel to leave them like that for a couple of minutes. You're in fact helping them learn a skill that they are going to need as they get older. So I appreciate you weighing in with your expertise and confirming that for me. So thank you. Okay. So that is that was my trick. And so it's funny now because, right, I still use it. I mean, this thing's like 10 years old now or something. And it's like, it's horrible. Like it's nasty and the dog ate it. But, for a couple times, even just like within the last 6 months that I was just in the room, with the door closed, and my son knocked on the door and he was like, "Where's the moose, Mom?" Like, don't you have? I was like, here it is. So now, like, they're expecting it. They're like, if you want any kind of privacy, if you want to be left alone, then you got to put the moose up, because otherwise it's fair game. So anyway, yeah, I really do believe that. I said, I know certainly kids as young as 5. The other thing that can be helpful, and I guess I don't have that handy. Oh, hold on just a second. Yeah. The other thing, again, if you have little kids, that can be useful to use with this technique is this visual clock. And this was another thing that my mom taught us about, and we used with our kids. But it's basically just until kids learn how to tell time, like they don't really know what's going on. But this, this shows them how much time is left. And so, you can just say, okay, when I get, when this gets to 0, when there's no more red, I'll be back out. And so if they really want to watch the clock, then you can use this to help them understand when you will be back. And then I do really believe the key is to be true to your word. And the second, don't spend extra time, stay to your allotted time, and immediately go out to them and check in on them and say, hey, I'm done. Do you need me for anything? And then that will develop trust with them that, okay, oh yeah, this will be okay. She'll be back. So that was my technique and worked really well for me. And I highly recommend you do it, not only to get some free time for yourself, so you're not like locking yourself in the bathroom and try to hide from your own children, which I know a lot of parents do. So you don't do that, but also, you're also teaching young children a really important life skill that will be useful for them when they go off to school. So that is my recommendation for that. Okay, so I don't think we have any questions in the chat. So that gives me time. I have a couple more minutes to talk about this failed product launch. So, so here's what happened. So I was working with a friend of mine, Erica Jefferson, and she runs a nonprofit for Black women in science and engineering. And she has a lot of members, and she does a lot of networking, career networking event, career development, those sorts of things. But what she doesn't have a lot of is training materials. And so we thought it would be a great partnership if she's got the network and I've got the training materials. It seemed like a perfect match because many of her members were looking for professional development tools. And so that's what we've got here in the accelerator. So we thought it would be a match made in heaven. And we decided to design a private cohort just for her members. And so we had a couple of, introductory seminars on it online. That was really well attended, lots of good feedback. And then we launch, we open the cart, if you will, and open the doors for this membership for a week, and nobody signed up. And I will tell you, it took me, so in the span of 24 hours, after the cart closed and it was obvious, like nobody was going to join. I went from, oh my gosh, I'm a total failure. Oh my gosh, there's something wrong with my product. Oh my gosh, nobody likes my stuff, to, I wonder, let's analyze this and see what we could have done better. Where might we have lost people? Then to, okay, well, how are we going to do this differently next time? Because there's definitely going to be a next time. To where I ended up, which was, how can I use this in a keynote in a keynote speech that I will be giving to engineering students next week, about, success and how to be successful, professional. And so that whole process was my own now shortcut version and internalized version of a hot wash. And so I really wanted to share that with you. One, because you're part of this family, so you get all the behind the scenes, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But two, because I have been doing this hot wash review for so long, it was very easy for me to kind of pick myself up from what could have easily been, I could still be wallowing in this failed product launch mindset if I allowed myself to. But because I had this habit of saying, okay, what worked well, what didn't work well, what can I learn from it? What can I do differently? Because I just, that's just a part of my process now, and what I'm trying to get to be a part of your process. It was very easy for me to, identify some, one, realize that I'm not a failure, realize this was, one of what I'm sure will be a bunch of product launches. I've been an entrepreneur for 18 months. So this is not going to be the last product launch, and it's probably not going to be the last failed product launch either. But I believe in what I'm working on. I get a lot of good feedback from you who are using the program. So I know there's something there. And I just need to figure out, was it the wrong audience? Was it the wrong time? Was it the wrong delivery? And what I do need to do differently to try to improve my probability of success. And then, as I said, I think the real thing for me, which had me know that I was completely in the right mindset, was, okay, how do I use this as a teaching moment? Obviously, I can use it as a teaching moment for all of you because we're in this together, we're inside the family, but I was ready to do it publicly, to 100 students, because these students are looking at me and being like, and they always ask me, how are you so successful? Like, how do we get to where you are? And the way you get to where I am is to not give up. I mean, there are a million things that have happened to me from, I don't know, you can go back as far as you want to, but professionally, from, when the professors laughed at me when I said I wanted to get a PhD to today, that could have kept me, that I could have chosen to stop, and I just didn't. So that's really how you get to be successful, is you just keep going. So So anyway, so that's how that happened, and I will keep you posted on what we decide to do next. Erica and I have already had a debrief, and we've got a plan. So hopefully the next round will be more successful. So, okay, so that is our Q&A. So let me just wrap things up here. So coming up in the accelerator, so next week, I think it's next week, actually, it's the 25th, I beg your pardon. On the 25th, you will have your technical influencer module in the roadmap. And this is my methodology for communicating technical information in a way that will resonate with leaders and investors. I really consider this to be one of my signature moves, if you will, because consistently throughout my career, I was chosen to be the one to speak to senior leadership, both inside and outside of my organizations, because of my communication style. And so I'm going to teach you that so that you can leverage that to your benefit. And then our next meeting is going to be March 22nd. So just to make sure that everyone's clear, this is not our usual meeting time. It is the Wednesday after. Week after, because the normal meeting time is actually during my spring break. And my family and I will be in Las Vegas and the Grand Canyon doing some traveling. So I moved that to March 22nd. The dashboard has also been updated. So if you put those on your calendar directly from the dashboard, please go and grab the one for March, because I did just update that. So with that, I will see you next time. Thanks, everybody.